Hello everybody. So today's video titled Miners Lose Faith, but Saylor, but MSTR, but strategy will never sell the Bitcoin. And this video is mostly about CleanSpark, and I'll briefly talk about IREN and Mara towards the end. It's mostly about CleanSpark, this video. Before I get to the CleanSpark news, let me just go back on, to this day, what is one of the best calls that I've ever seen in first principles thinking corporate finance, if there is such a thing, right? In finance, seen through the lens of engineering, seen through the lens of thermodynamics, I frankly think that the conference call of Michael Saylor, the Q3 2024 conference call that was released October 30th, is frankly a masterpiece. And in that conference call, Saylor said, "I will never sell Bitcoin. I will always buy Bitcoin. I will never mess with your trade. Be you a gamma hedge fund who doesn't care about direction, or be you a shorter, a person who shorts my stock." In fact, Saylor said he welcomes the shorts, and he only works for the long-term common shareholder. Long-term common shareholder, and this is key, because I think the reason why CleanSpark announced what they did today is because they want to stop diluting right now. So that's putting the short-term price movement ahead of the long-term price movement. So anyways, this was a masterpiece, because this means that people who want to short something, are they going to short a miner who does a 180 and start to say, oh, I'm going to sell Bitcoin now? So it's like you're shorting it, right? If you're a miner and you sell Bitcoin, you don't really believe in the asset. Is your equity going to be attractive to someone who puts on a short trade? Is anybody going to be able to build a gamma strategy on your equity if you change your strategy vis-a-vis the underlying asset? And so I think this is why MicroStrategy barely moved today, while the miners were down all over, because people are, in my view, perhaps selling the miners and just rolling it into MicroStrategy. And this is something that I'm beginning to think I should have done a long time ago. So let me get started. CleanSpark. This video is mostly about CleanSpark today. So this was the announcement of CleanSpark, which stunned me and stunned the market. So I'm fine with the credit facility. That's I know traditional Wall Street people don't like that. To me, that's not a problem. It's fine. Borrow money, get some leverage, that's fine. What I absolutely don't like is, with our Bitcoin holding now exceeding 12,000 Bitcoin, almost, right? 12, just slightly, approximately valued at 1 billion. We believe this is the right time to evolve from a nearly 100% hold strategy adopted in mid-2023 and move back to using a portion of our monthly production to support our operations. In other words, we're going to sell Bitcoin. In other words, we are not going to use dilution to finance operations. So the playbook of a smart miner, in my view, was you dilute the stock at, in the case of CleanSpark, it was nearly a 2x price to NAV. You dilute that 2x price to NAV to not buy Bitcoin, but to mine Bitcoin half off, which really equals to diluting at 4x price to NAV, if you really think about it. And no, they don't do that. Now they're just going to sell Bitcoin to fund their operation. So I didn't see the news. Is in what universe is now the right time to sell Bitcoin? In what universe is now the right time to sell Bitcoin? I could be a simple analyst and do a simple analysis. Wait a minute, this is definitely not the right time. There was all of the month of November and December and January and February. There you go. That's 4 random months that would have been a better time than right now. I could make that simple analysis, or I could say, well, wait a minute. You're buying dollar, you're selling Bitcoin. So if you're selling Bitcoin, that means you're buying dollar. You're going out and you're buying dollar. You're investing in US dollar. Does that mean you find the dollar attractive now? Was the Fed abolished? Did the dollar stop to grow its money supply? Was there a fixed cap? Did someone in Congress somewhere vote a fixed cap on the money supply? And did we find how many dollars there are out there? Is it 70 trillion? And did we decide to stop the growth of the money dollar at 70 trillion? Like, okay, so CleanSpark is going to buy fiat. They're going to buy fiat. They're literally going to be buying fiat. So So no, I don't want to be invested in a company that's going to be buying fiat. I have plenty of those. In fact, all of my portfolio is companies that are buying fiat, right? And so if you're not going to be a Bitcoin hodler, I'm going to compare you to a company that deals in fiat. And then you're dealing with formidable companies, formidable competitors, right? I don't want to see a company acquire fiat. Anyways, this is what have we diluted for? Right? And we've diluted a lot. What have we diluted for if not to keep the hodl bag? Like you dilute to keep the hodl bag. And CleanSpark was so lucky in that it was granted a nice price to NAV by the market, right? There is this general consensus in the market that this is the best run miner, and CleanSpark is the best run miner. That's the general consensus. Is the best run miner a miner who's now going to sell a pristine asset because they want to dilute less, because they want to prioritize the short-term price action, the short-term common share, as opposed to working and only working for the long-term common shareholder like a MicroStrategy? I think this news made MicroStrategy so much more valuable today. And I think this will be a tough decision for me because a decision is going to have to be made about this. Now, CleanSpark is not hodling. Anyways, IREN, I briefly want to talk about IREN. Frankly, this is not nearly as big of a deal as CleanSpark. IREN stops expanding in the Bitcoin mining activity now, and now they're going to take the profits of Bitcoin mining, and they're going to invest those profits into going after the AI opportunity. And like right now, I put my the teeny tiny bit, the tiny 1% of classic MBA finance, 1970s fiat, capital asset pricing model. Shouldn't you be giving me back the capital and you let me decide how I want to invest in AI or if I want to invest in AI? Because if I'm going to have to compare IREN to the AI in HPC and AI cloud services business, that's great. But then I have to compare IREN to Nebius. I have to compare IREN to CoreWeave. To a lesser extent, I have to compare IREN to some REIT. I have to compare IREN to AWS, to Google and GCP, to Microsoft, right? To Azure. So you're deciding for me that the Bitcoin mining. I mean, this is a classic CAPM issue, if you ask me. Anyways, it's lesser, to me, it's less of a big deal than just because, and why is it less of a big deal, right? Because IREN always sold. They've always sold their Bitcoin. It's like if you invest in IREN, you knew this, right? They've always sold their Bitcoin. So for them, it's not as big of a deal. It's not that big of a shift of strategy for IREN to just say, we're not going to grow Bitcoin mining anymore. But it's a major shift in strategy for CleanSpark to do that. And I'm not happy to see that. And my guess, my little time that I spent on X scrolling through, my guess is that I'm not the only one who's not happy to see that. And so I'm going to need to make a tough decision on miners, and that's likely going to increase my position in MicroStrategy. And I think a lot of people are going to think like that in the coming months, and frankly have been thinking like that for a long while. Growing more and more bullish on cheap stats. I'm growing more and more bullish on just companies that are cheap and that have guided that they are a Bitcoin treasury company and that have guided that they're going to hodl and they're going to keep the Bitcoin. And that's why my favorite miner, I'm just going to go ahead and call it, my favorite miner is Mara. Because when I look at Mara, right now, the price, the market cap to Bitcoin NAV, so the price to NAV is 1.05, so you only pay 5% of a $4.2 billion business. You only pay 5% of a $4.2 billion business for everything Mara owns, from the data centers to the miners to the wind energy farm. Everything Mara owns, in my view, is trading at 5% of 4.2 billion. So you're getting it essentially for free, and they're not going to sell the Bitcoin because they've said that they are following the MicroStrategy playbook. They raised $2 billion. They bought out of the money they raised. Let's look at their use of cash in 2024. They did a convertible note that was $2.179 billion, and out of that, they bought $1.93 billion of Bitcoin. So that's straight MicroStrategy strategy. And the rest, they've invested in the business and they've mined Bitcoin. And so if you're just going to dilute to buy Bitcoin, that's the straight MicroStrategy playbook. If you're going to dilute to fund your operations, which allow you to acquire Bitcoin on the cheaper than spot market, it's also accretive. It's also accretive. That's why I think it makes sense, because Mara, it doesn't have the most efficient miners, but when it mines a Bitcoin, back of the napkin math, it probably mines that Bitcoin about 20% off, right? So if it mines the Bitcoin about 20% off, you're really at a 1.35, 1.45 price to NAV here. So I'm growing more and more bullish on Mara. And I recommend, I cannot believe this interview only has 449 views. I recommend this interview of their head of digital assets at Mara, Paul Giordano, where he essentially talks about how Mara is now a Bitcoin treasury company. And I like that very much. And in CleanSpark's defense, there's been a lot of interviews from that CEO, so I need to listen in. I haven't done that. But boy, that headline is not good, that they're just going to sell Bitcoin and stop the hodling strategy. That is not a good headline, and I'm going to have to make a tough decision on Miner. I'll let you know on Patreon if I do anything about that, because CleanSpark is one of my position, and so is Mara. Anyways, this was not financial advice, not investment advice, just entertainment. Hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.